You have 30 seconds to step aside before I shut down this entire terminal. The words hung in the humid Atlanta air like a storm cloud. TSA agent Derek Collins froze mid-reach, his latex gloves inches from the expensive leather briefcase. Around them, Gate 12's security checkpoint buzzed with morning rush-hour chaos. Business travelers juggled coffee cups and laptops. Families wrestled with strollers and carry-ons. But every eye was now on the man in the charcoal suit. Marcus Sterling stood perfectly still, his voice carrying that quiet authority that makes people listen. Not yelling, not threatening, just stating fact. Collins laughed nervously. "Sir, you need to calm down and cooperate with security procedures." Marcus checked his Patek Philippe watch. 29 seconds. Have you ever been judged by the color of your skin in those crucial moments when you had the power to change everything? 7 minutes earlier, Marcus had approached the security checkpoint like any other business traveler. First-class boarding pass tucked in his jacket pocket, platinum Amex visible in his wallet. The kind of subtle signals that usually smoothed the way through airport bureaucracy. But Collins had other ideas. "Random additional screening," he announced, pointing Marcus toward the secondary inspection area. The word random carried weight that wasn't lost on anyone within earshot. Marcus glanced at his watch. 7:47 a.m. His flight to JFK departed at 8:15. The board meeting that would determine his company's future started at 10 a.m. sharp. He had time, but not much to spare. "Of course," Marcus said, his voice steady. He'd played this game before. Collins motioned toward the metal table. "Empty your pockets completely. Remove your shoes, belt, and jacket." Behind Marcus, the regular security line moved smoothly. Other passengers grabbed their belongings and walked toward their gates. A few glanced over with mild curiosity. Most kept walking. But Sarah Chen, a marketing executive heading to Boston, noticed something off. She'd watched Collins wave through 3 white businessmen in similar suits without a second glance. Her phone was already recording when Collins began his performance. "Let's see what we're really dealing with here," Collins said, lifting Marcus's Italian leather briefcase with exaggerated care, like he was handling evidence at a crime scene. Marcus stood in his socks, arms slightly raised, as Collins ran a metal detection wand over his body. The wand beeped near his wrist. Collins examined the Patek Philippe with suspicion. "Expensive watch for someone your age," Collins observed. "I worked hard for it," Marcus replied. Collins dumped the briefcase contents onto the metal table. A MacBook Pro clattered against the steel surface. Important documents scattered. A first-class boarding pass fluttered to the floor. Sarah's live stream was gaining viewers. The comments started flowing. "This is disgusting. What year is this? Someone needs to stop this." But also, just comply and move on. Security is just doing their job. Collins held up Marcus's platinum credit card, studying it like a counterfeit bill. "Sterling Technologies," he read aloud. "What kind of business is that?" "Technology consulting," Marcus answered. "Uh-huh." Collins's tone suggested he'd heard that line before. "And what exactly do you consult about?" Marcus's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Airport security systems." Collins either didn't hear or didn't care. He was now examining Marcus's iPad, scrolling through emails with the casual violation of someone who'd done this many times before. TSA Supervisor Janet Rivera approached, drawn by the growing crowd. She was a 20-year veteran who'd seen her share of difficult passengers, but something about this scene felt different. "Your problem here, Collins?" she asked. "Just being thorough," Collins replied. "You know how it is." Rivera nodded. She did know how it was. The unspoken profiles, the extra attention certain passengers received, the way some people seemed to trigger additional scrutiny while others sailed through. Marcus's phone buzzed. The caller ID read board chair. Then another call from legal team. Then communications director. "Popular guy," Collins smirked, confiscating the phone. "Mind if I see who's calling?" "Actually, I do mind," Marcus said, his voice carrying the first hint of steel. Collins ignored him, scrolling through the missed calls. Names like Director of Operations and Chief Financial Officer filled the screen. Big titles for what Collins assumed was a small company. The crowd was growing. Sarah's live stream had attracted 8,000 viewers. Other passengers were pulling out phones. The hashtag airport racism was starting to trend locally. "Sir, I need you to explain these contacts," Collins said, his authority inflating with the audience. Marcus looked at his watch again. 7:52 a.m., 23 minutes until boarding. "Those are my colleagues," he said simply. "Colleagues?" Collins's eyebrows shot up. "What kind of colleagues have titles like Chief Financial Officer? The kind who work at Sterling Technologies?" Collins laughed. "Right. And I suppose you're the CEO?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Marcus met Collins's gaze steadily. "I suppose I am." More laughter from Collins. "Sure you are, buddy. And I'm the Director of Homeland Security." Behind them, Rivera was getting nervous. The crowd was growing. Phones were recording. Her radio crackled with reports of situation at security checkpoint. Airport manager Robert Hayes was en route. But Collins was in full performance mode now. "People like you always think the rules don't apply," he said, his voice carrying across the terminal. "Think you can just name-drop your way out of proper screening." Marcus felt the familiar weight of representation. How many times had he stood in rooms where he was the only black face? How many times had he heard that same dismissive tone, the assumption that his success was somehow fraudulent? His phone buzzed again. This time, the caller ID read, "Mayor's office." Collins saw it too. "Now the mayor's calling? What's next, the president?" The crowd murmured. Sarah's live stream chat was exploding. "This is insane. Sue them. Get a lawyer. Stay calm, brother." Marcus stood perfectly still, watching Collins perform for the cameras. 30 years of building a technology empire. Contracts worth billions. Thousands of employees. A company that had revolutionized airport security systems across the country. And here he was, being treated like a suspect for the crime of flying while black. But Marcus Sterling hadn't built an empire by losing his temper. He'd built it by staying calm, thinking strategically, and choosing his battles carefully. This was about to become a very important battle. His watch showed 7:57 a.m. 18 minutes until boarding. Time to end this charade. Airport manager Robert Hayes arrived at 7:50 a.m. his polished shoes clicking against the terminal floor. 28 years in airport management had taught him to spot trouble from 100 yards away. The crowd around security checkpoint 12 was definitely trouble. "What's the situation?" Hayes asked Rivera, his eyes scanning the scene. "Passenger screening," Rivera replied, but her voice lacked conviction. "Collins is being thorough." Hayes noticed the phones, the live stream, the way other passengers were stopping to watch instead of hurrying to their gates. This was the kind of situation that ended up on the evening news. "Sir, I'm Robert Hayes, airport manager," he said, extending his hand to Marcus. "I apologize for any inconvenience." Marcus accepted the handshake. "Marcus Sterling, an inconvenience is an understatement." Hayes glanced at Marcus's belongings, scattered across the metal table. First-class boarding pass, platinum cards, expensive electronics, the kind of passenger who usually sailed through security without a second glance. "I'm sure we can resolve this quickly," Hayes said. "Collins, what's the holdup?" Collins straightened his shoulders. "Standard additional screening, sir. This passenger has been uncooperative." "Uncooperative how?" "Claimed to be a CEO when I asked about his contacts, making up stories about his job." Hayes studied Marcus more carefully. The tailored suit, the confident posture, the way he held himself despite the obvious humiliation. This didn't look like someone making up stories. "And you are?" Hayes asked. "Marcus Sterling, CEO of Sterling Technologies." Hayes felt a flutter of recognition. Sterling Technologies. He'd heard that name recently. Something about contracts. Something important. But before he could place it, Collins interrupted. "See? Still telling the same story. I think we need to do a full body search." The crowd shifted uneasily. Sarah's live stream viewer count hit 15,000. Comments were flowing faster than she could read them. Someone had started a Twitter thread. The hashtag airport racism was trending statewide. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time the caller ID showed Delta Operations. "That's probably about my flight," Marcus said calmly. "Your flight can wait," Collins replied. "Security comes first." But Marcus was done waiting. He reached slowly into his jacket pocket, his movements deliberate and visible. Collins tensed, his hand moving toward his radio. "Easy," Marcus said, producing a business card. "I think this might clear things up." The card was thick, expensive stock, embossed lettering, the kind of business card that cost more to print than most people made in a day. Collins barely glanced at it. Anyone can make a business card. But Hayes was reading over Collins's shoulder. Marcus Sterling, Chief Executive Officer, Sterling Technologies. The company logo was sleek, professional, and suddenly Hayes remembered where he'd heard that name. The quarterly contractor meetings, the security system updates, the massive technology infrastructure that kept the airport running. Sterling Technologies wasn't just any company. They were the company. The primary contractor for Hartsfield-Jackson's entire security apparatus. Hayes's face went pale. "Collins, I need to speak with you privately." "Sir, I'm in the middle of a security procedure." "Now," Hayes said, his voice sharp with authority. They stepped aside, Hayes whispering urgently. Marcus watched Collins' expression change from confidence to confusion to something approaching panic. Meanwhile, Sarah's live stream was gaining momentum. Viewers were researching Sterling Technologies, posting screenshots of the company's website, sharing news articles about their recent contracts. The comments shifted. "Holy shit, look up Sterling Technologies. This company is massive. They literally run airport security. This guy is about to own this place." Officer Williams arrived next, summoned by reports of a disturbance at security. He was a 15-year veteran who'd seen every type of airport drama imaginable. But the tension in this crowd felt different. "What's going on?" Williams asked. Hayes was still whispering frantically to Collins, who kept shaking his head in disbelief. Rivera was fielding radio calls from supervisors demanding updates. The crowd was growing larger, flight announcements echoing overhead. Gate 12, final boarding call for Flight 1247 to JFK. Marcus's flight, the board meeting that would determine his company's future, was now less than 2 hours away. "Excuse me," Marcus said, his voice cutting through the chaos. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." All eyes turned to him. The man who'd been treated like a criminal for the past 15 minutes was now commanding the room with quiet authority. "Collins," Hayes said, his voice strained. "You need to wrap this up immediately." But Collins was stubborn, or maybe just too proud to admit his mistake. "Sir, I don't care what his business card says. I'm following protocol." "Protocol." Marcus's voice carried a note of steel. "Let me ask you something, Collins. Do you know what contract your security system operates under?" Collins blinked. "What?" "The computers you use to screen passengers, the metal detectors, the X-ray machines, the software that processes my information. Do you know who provides those systems?" The crowd was silent now. Even Sarah's live stream chat had slowed, viewers sensing something big was about to happen. "TSA provides our equipment," Collins said uncertainly. Marcus smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. "TSA contracts with private companies for technology services. Has for 15 years. And do you know who holds the primary contract for Hartsfield-Jackson International Airport?" Hayes closed his eyes. He knew what was coming. "Sterling Technologies," Marcus said quietly. "We design the system you're using to harass me. We maintain it. We upgrade it. We train the technicians who keep it running." Collins's face went through several expressions in rapid succession. Confusion, realization, horror. "That's impossible," he whispered. Marcus's phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen. "That's my board chair calling about today's contract renewal meeting. The one where we'll discuss whether to continue our partnership with this airport." The implications hit Hayes like a physical blow. Sterling Technologies wasn't just a contractor, they were the contractor. The company that kept the airport's security systems running, The company that employed thousands of people directly and indirectly. The company whose CEO was currently being humiliated at his own security checkpoint. "Miss Sterling," Hayes said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I am so sorry. This is completely unacceptable." But Marcus wasn't done. "There's one more thing you should know about today's meeting." He paused, letting the tension build. Sarah's live stream viewers were holding their breath. The crowd pressed closer. "Today isn't just about contract renewal," Marcus continued. "We're also discussing a major expansion. New international terminal, additional security systems, the kind of project that creates jobs." Hayes felt his career flashing before his eyes. How many jobs? 8,000 direct positions, 30,000 indirect. Over the next 5 years. The number hung in the air like a judgment. Collins looked like he might vomit. Marcus checked his watch. 8:09 a.m. 6 minutes until boarding. "Now," he said, his voice carrying across the silent terminal. "I believe someone owes me an apology." The silence stretched like a taut wire. Every person in the terminal security area seemed frozen, waiting for Collins's response. Sarah's live stream had exploded to 75,000 viewers. The comments were a blur of shock, outrage, and anticipation. Collins opened his mouth, then closed it. His face had gone from confident authority to sweaty panic in the span of 2 minutes. I was just doing my job." "Your job," Marcus repeated softly. "Tell me, Collins, what exactly do you think your job is?" "Security screening, following protocols." "Whose protocols?" Collins glanced at Hayes, who was studying the floor like it held the secrets of the universe. "TSA protocols." "And who do you think writes the software that manages those protocols at this airport?" The question hung in the air. Around them, the morning rush continued with an undercurrent of tension. Passengers pretended not to stare while obviously straining to hear every word. Marcus's phone buzzed again. This time, he answered it without hesitation. "James? Yes. I'm experiencing a service issue at our Atlanta location." His voice carried clearly across the checkpoint. Professional, calm, deadly. The voice on the other end was loud enough for everyone to hear. "Marcus, is this about the renewal meeting today? Legal called and said something about discrimination documentation." Marcus kept his eyes on Collins while he spoke. "That's correct. We're having some challenges with the human resources aspect of our contract. Do we need to postpone the board meeting?" "No. But I'll need a full incident report within the hour. Every interaction has been recorded, time-stamped, and documented." Hayes stepped forward, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Mr. Sterling, please, let's discuss this privately." But Marcus wasn't finished with his phone call. "James, you should also know that this incident is being live-streamed. Currently 75,000 viewers and climbing. The hashtag airport racism is trending nationally." The board chair's voice carried a note of steel. "Marcus, you have our full support. Legal is standing by. PR is monitoring social media. Handle this however you see fit." Marcus ended the call and looked at Hayes. "You wanted to discuss this privately?" "Yes, please, in my office." "I think we're past privacy," Marcus said, gesturing to the crowd of phones. "But I'm willing to discuss resolution." Hayes nodded frantically. "Of course, whatever you need." "First, I need Agent Collins to acknowledge what just happened." Collins looked like a man watching his career implode in real time. "Sir, I apologize. I didn't realize—" "You didn't realize what?" Marcus interrupted. "That I was telling the truth? That successful black people exist? That your assumptions might be wrong?" The crowd pressed closer. Sarah's livestream chat was moving too fast to read, but the tone was clear. People were angry. They were sharing the stream. They were demanding accountability. "I made a mistake," Collins said finally. "To see what kind of mistake?" Collins's voice was barely audible. "I profiled you. Based on what?" "Your race." The admission hit the crowd like a physical blow. Someone gasped. Others shook their heads. Sarah's viewer count hit 100,000. But Marcus wasn't satisfied. And what were the consequences of that profiling? I humiliated you. Publicly, without cause. Go on. Collins was sweating now. I violated your civil rights. I delayed your flight. I damaged your reputation. And? Hayes jumped in. You potentially damaged the airport's relationship with our primary technology contractor. Marcus turned to Hayes. Potentially? No. Definitely, absolutely damaged. And what are the financial implications of that damage? Hayes swallowed hard. Our contract with Sterling Technologies is worth $847 million annually. The renewal includes expansion opportunities worth an additional $400 million. The numbers hit the crowd like a thunderclap. Sarah's live stream exploded with comments. $847 million. 0 cents. This man owns the airport. Collins is so fired, justice incoming. But Marcus still wasn't finished. And employment implications? 12,000 direct jobs, 30,000 indirect positions. Throughout the Atlanta region, Collins looked like he might collapse. The weight of his actions was becoming clear. He hadn't just harassed a passenger, he'd potentially destroyed thousands of jobs, threatened the economic foundation of the airport. There's one more thing, Marcus said quietly, something I haven't mentioned yet. The crowd leaned in. Sarah zoomed her camera closer. Today's board meeting isn't just about contract renewal. We're also voting on our expansion into 6 additional airports, similar contracts, similar job creation. Hayes felt his knees go weak. How many additional positions? 50,000 jobs. Across the Southeast, over the next 3 years. The scope was staggering. This wasn't just about one airport or one contract. Sterling Technologies was positioned to become the dominant airport security contractor in the region. And Collins had just given them every reason to take their business elsewhere. The board is watching this situation closely, Marcus continued. They're evaluating whether our corporate values align with the institutions we serve. His phone buzzed with a text. He glanced at it, then showed the screen to Hayes. The message was from his chief legal officer. Discrimination clauses in all contracts activated, awaiting your instructions. Hayes read the message and felt his world tilt. Mr. Sterling, what can we do to fix this? Depends. Are you interested in fixing the symptom or the disease? The disease. Absolutely the disease. Marcus nodded approvingly. Then we're going to have a very different conversation than I expected. He looked at his watch. 8:12 a.m. 3 minutes until boarding. Collins, he said, his voice carrying new authority. You're going to walk with me to my gate. You're going to personally ensure I make my flight, and you're going to think very carefully about what you learned today. Collins nodded mutely. Hayes, you're going to call Delta and hold that plane for 2 more minutes. Then you're going to schedule a meeting with my operations team for this afternoon. We're going to redesign your training programs. Hayes was already reaching for his radio. Of course, whatever you need. And Rivera? Marcus turned to the TSA supervisor. You're going to write a detailed report about what happened here, not to cover anyone's ass, to document exactly how profiling works in practice. Rivera nodded. Yes, sir. Marcus began gathering his scattered belongings. His movements were unhurried, deliberate. The crowd watched in fascination as he packed his briefcase with the same calm precision he'd shown throughout the ordeal. One last thing, he said, standing. This isn't about revenge. It's about change. Collins, you're going to help me create a training program that ensures this never happens again, to anyone. Collins looked up in surprise. Sir? You're going to tell your story, what you were thinking, what assumptions you made, how it felt to discover you were wrong. Real change requires real honesty. The crowd was silent. This wasn't the vindictive takedown they'd expected. This was something else entirely. Marcus straightened his tie, picked up his briefcase, and walked toward his gate. Collins followed behind him like a chastened schoolboy. But as they walked, Marcus's phone buzzed one more time. This call was from the governor's office. The real chess match was just beginning. The Delta Sky Club's private conference room overlooked the bustling terminal below. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Marcus could see passengers hurrying toward gates, unaware that a conversation happening 50 feet above them might reshape airport security nationwide. Hayes had assembled an impressive group in record time. Delta's regional manager sat beside the airport's legal counsel. The mayor's chief of staff had joined by video call. Even a representative from the Georgia Department of Transportation was present. Marcus entered the room at 8:45 a.m., having made his rescheduled flight departure by 30 minutes. His assistant Jennifer had arrived with 2 associates from Sterling Technologies' legal team, the cavalry, as his board chair had texted. "Mr. Sterling, thank you for agreeing to meet," Hayes began. "I want to start by offering our deepest apologies." Marcus raised a hand. "Apologies are a starting point, not a solution. Let's talk about what happened, why it happened, and how we ensure it never happens again." He activated his iPad, connecting it to the room's presentation system. The first slide showed Sterling Technologies' current contract details. $847 million, 0 cents annually, 15-year partnership, 99.7%, system uptime. "This contract represents more than revenue," Marcus said. "It represents trust. The trust that our technology will work flawlessly. The trust that our partnership serves the public interest. The trust that our values align with your institution's values." The room shifted uncomfortably. Everyone understood the implication. "Today's incident suggests a fundamental breakdown in that trust," Marcus continued. "Not with our technology, but with the human systems that surround it." Jennifer stepped forward, distributing printed reports. "These are discrimination incident reports from the past 12 months, filed by passengers, documented by oversight groups, compiled by civil rights organizations." Hayes scanned the report, his face growing paler with each page. 43 documented cases of apparent profiling, 16 formal complaints, 7 involving threats of legal action. "All at this airport," Marcus confirmed. "All potentially preventable with proper training and oversight." The legal counsel leaned forward. "Mr. Sterling, what are you proposing?" "I'm proposing we fix the system, not just apologize for its failures." The next slide showed Sterling Technologies' expansion plans. 6 airports, 50,000 jobs, $2 billion, $300 million, 0 cents in regional economic impact, over 5 years. "These expansions are contingent on successful partnerships," Marcus explained. "Partnerships that demonstrate shared values. Partnerships that serve diverse communities effectively." The mayor's chief of staff spoke from the video screen. "What specific changes are you looking for?" Marcus clicked to the next slide. The Sterling Standard, a comprehensive bias recognition and prevention program. Mandatory for all customer-facing staff. Updated annually, monitored continuously. The program details were extensive. 40 hours of initial training, quarterly refresher sessions, role-playing with community volunteers. Performance evaluations tied to discrimination metrics. "Cost?" Hayes asked. "We'll fund the development and implementation. $2.3 million over the first year. Ongoing costs absorbed into existing training budgets." The room buzzed with whispered conversations. This wasn't just an apology meeting. This was a complete restructuring of how the airport handled bias prevention. "There's more," Marcus said. "Real-time monitoring system. Anonymous reporting mechanism. Monthly public dashboard showing improvement metrics." Jennifer distributed tablets showing mock-ups of the proposed system. Passengers could rate their security experience immediately. Staff could report concerning interactions. Supervisors could identify patterns before they became problems. "This is ambitious," the legal counsel said. "Implementation timeline? 60 days for basic training, full system operational in 6 months. We have teams standing by." Hayes studied the proposal. "And if we don't agree to these changes?" Marcus's expression didn't change. "Then we'll implement them elsewhere. Atlanta is our largest contract, but not our only option." The threat was delivered with surgical precision. No anger, no bluster, just business reality. "The board meets in 90 minutes, Marcus continued. "They'll vote on 3 items: contract renewal, expansion plans, and whether to offer similar partnerships to competing airports." The Delta representative spoke up. "What about operational disruption during transition?" "Minimal. We'll use existing staff as trainers. Phased implementation, regular operations maintained throughout. Jennifer pulled up case studies from other airports where Sterling Technologies had implemented similar programs. Discrimination complaints down 73%. Employee satisfaction up 41%. Passenger experience scores at record highs. The data is clear, Marcus said. Bias training doesn't just prevent legal problems, it improves business outcomes. The mayor's chief of staff leaned into his camera. Mr. Sterling, you have Atlanta's full support, whatever resources you need. Thank you, but I need more than support. I need accountability. The next slide showed proposed oversight structure, community advisory board, quarterly public reports, external audits, independent complaint resolution. No more internal investigations that disappear, Marcus said. No more promises that lead nowhere. Transparent, accountable, measurable change. Hayes was scribbling notes frantically. Timeline for board response. The board convenes at 10:15. Voting begins at 10:30. Results announced at 11. The pressure was explicit. Less than 2 hours to commit to fundamental change or watch $847 million, 0 cents, walk away. What about Collins? The legal counsel asked. Disciplinary action? Marcus paused. Collins made a mistake, but he's not the disease. He's a symptom. Fix the disease, and people like Collins become part of the solution. You're not recommending termination? I'm recommending education. Collins will help develop the training program. He'll share his story. He'll help other officers understand how unconscious bias works in practice. The room was silent. This wasn't the vindictive response they'd expected. Real change requires real honesty, Marcus continued. Collins was honest about his mistake. Now we use that honesty to prevent future mistakes. Jennifer stepped forward again. The governor's office has expressed interest in making this a statewide model. Implementation at all major airports. The scope kept expanding. This wasn't just about Atlanta anymore. It was about creating a new standard for airport security nationwide. Questions? Marcus asked. Hayes raised his hand. What happens if individual officers resist the training? Then they find other jobs. This isn't optional. This is the new baseline for employment. And if passengers complain about longer security procedures? The procedures won't be longer. They'll be more respectful, more professional, more effective. The legal counsel had one more question. What's your timeline for implementation at other airports? Marcus smiled. That depends on how today's vote goes. Success breeds success. Failure breeds alternatives. His phone buzzed. Text from the board chair. Departing for meeting. Final vote in 45 minutes. Ladies and gentlemen, Marcus said, standing. I need to join my board meeting. You have 30 minutes to decide whether Atlanta wants to be part of the solution or part of the problem. He paused at the door. Collins is waiting outside. He has something to say to all of you. I suggest you listen carefully. As Marcus left, Collins entered the room. His face was still pale, but his voice was steady. I want to tell you about the worst mistake I've ever made, he began, and how it taught me something I should have learned years ago. The real education was just beginning. Sterling Technologies board meeting ended at 11:47 a.m. with a unanimous vote. Contract renewed, expansion approved. Atlanta selected as the pilot site for the Sterling Standard program. By noon, Hayes had called an emergency staff meeting. By 1 p.m., Collins was standing in front of 200 airport employees, telling his story. I looked at a successful black man and saw a threat, he said, his voice carrying across the assembled crowd. I let my assumptions override my training. I let my biases override my professionalism. The audience was uncomfortable, security officers shifting in their seats, supervisors taking notes. Airport management watching every reaction. Mr. Sterling had every right to destroy my career, Collins continued. Instead, he's giving me a chance to fix what I broke. Not just for me, but for everyone who comes after. Rivera stood next. I supervised that interaction. I watched discrimination happen and called it procedure. That makes me complicit. The honesty was brutal and necessary. No excuses, no deflection, just acknowledgement of failure and commitment to change. Hayes took the podium. Effective immediately, Sterling Technologies will implement the most comprehensive bias prevention program in the country. Right here, starting with us. The details rolled out quickly. Mandatory training for all staff within 60 days. New reporting systems online by month's end. Community Oversight Board established within the week. This isn't punishment, Hayes emphasized. This is evolution. We're going to become the model other airports study. The first training session began that afternoon. 24 security officers, including Collins, gathered in a conference room with Marcus's training team. The program was unlike anything they'd experienced. No corporate PowerPoint presentations, no legal disclaimers, just real scenarios, honest discussions, and uncomfortable truths. BS isn't about being racist, the lead trainer explained. It's about shortcuts our brains take when processing information. Everyone has biases. The question is whether we recognize and manage them. Collins participated actively, describing his thought process, explaining his assumptions, demonstrating how unconscious bias had shaped his actions. I saw expensive clothes and thought drug dealer, he admitted. I saw confidence and thought arrogance. I saw success and thought fake, all because of skin color. The room was silent. Other officers recognizing their own thought patterns in Collins's confession. By week's end, the new reporting system was operational. Passengers could rate their security experience immediately after screening. Anonymous feedback flowed to supervisors in real time. The results were immediate and dramatic. Complaints dropped 43% in the first month. Employee satisfaction increased as they learned to handle difficult situations professionally. Sarah Chen, whose live stream had captured the original incident, returned to Atlanta for a follow-up story. This time, she sailed through security with a smile and a thank you from the officer who screened her. The difference is incredible, she reported to her 300,000 social media followers. Same airport, completely different experience. This is what accountability looks like. The Sterling standard expanded rapidly. Within 6 months, 12 airports had implemented similar programs. Federal legislation was proposed, requiring bias training for all TSA contractors. Marcus received the Congressional Civil Rights Award 8 months later. His acceptance speech was brief. Change doesn't come from anger, he said. It comes from strategic action, from using whatever power you have to create the world you want to live in. Collins stood in the audience, now a senior trainer helping other airports implement the Sterling standard. His transformation from perpetrator to educator had become a central part of the program's success. I was the problem, he would tell training groups, but I learned to become part of the solution. That's the choice we all have. The economic impact was substantial. Sterling Technologies' stock price increased 18% following positive media coverage. The company won contracts at 15 additional airports. Employment grew by 23,000 positions. But the real victory was quieter. Daily interactions improved. Passengers felt respected. Officers felt proud of their work. The airport became a model for how institutions could change when held accountable. Marcus kept a photo on his desk from that first training session. Collins speaking to his colleagues, Rivera taking notes, Hayes listening intently. All of them learning together. Real change, he'd learned, wasn't about revenge or punishment. It was about transformation, about creating systems that brought out the best in people instead of the worst. The Sterling standard wasn't perfect, but it was progress, measurable, sustainable, replicable progress. And it had started with 30 seconds of quiet power in a busy airport terminal. 2 years later, Marcus Sterling stood in the same security checkpoint where everything had changed. But now he was there as a visitor, not a passenger. The Sterling standard had become the gold standard for airport bias prevention, implemented at 127 airports nationwide, adopted by the European Union, studied by civil rights organizations worldwide. Collins approached with a warm smile. "Mr. Sterling, good to see you again." "Derek," Marcus replied, shaking his hand. "How's the training program going?" "Incredible. We've got airports from 6 countries sending teams for certification. Who would have thought?" The transformation was visible everywhere. Diverse training materials, multilingual signage, officers who looked like the communities they served. Marcus watched passengers move through security with dignity and tact. No one pulled aside for random screening that wasn't truly random. No one treated with suspicion for succeeding while black. The real victory, Marcus told a group of business students later that day, wasn't changing one person's mind. It was changing the system that shaped that person's behavior. His story had become required reading in corporate leadership programs. Harvard Business School called it the Sterling approach, using economic leverage to create social change. But Marcus knew the work wasn't finished. Bias existed in hiring practices, lending decisions, healthcare delivery. Everywhere, people made quick judgments about others' worth. Power without purpose is just privilege, he would tell audiences. Purpose without power is just wishful thinking. But power with purpose? That changes the world. The Sterling Standard had prevented an estimated 15,000 discrimination incidents in its first 2 years, saved careers, preserved dignity, created opportunities. Yet Marcus's proudest moment wasn't the awards or recognition. It was watching Collins train a new class of officers, sharing his story without shame, helping others avoid his mistakes. This is what redemption looks like, Marcus thought. Not perfection, but progress. Not revenge, but transformation. Sarah Chen had built a career covering social justice stories. Her original live stream had been viewed 50 million times. She'd leveraged that platform to document positive change across the country. Black stories matter, she would say. Not just the trauma, but the triumph. Not just the problems, but the solutions. Real-life stories of people who refused to accept injustice as inevitable. These touching stories of transformation had inspired similar changes in hotels, restaurants, retail stores. The Sterling Standard had become a template for bias prevention across industries. But perhaps the most important change was internal. Marcus had learned that his greatest power wasn't his wealth or influence. It was his willingness to stay calm under pressure. To think strategically instead of emotionally, to focus on solutions instead of problems. That's the real lesson, he concluded. Not that discrimination exists, we all know that, but that it doesn't have to. That ordinary people can create extraordinary change when they choose to act with purpose. Your turn to take action. Have you witnessed discrimination in airports, workplaces, or public spaces? Share your story in the comments below. Your experience matters, and your voice can inspire others to stand up for what's right. Hit that subscribe button for more real-life stories of people using their power to create positive change. Because these black stories, these touching stories of transformation, remind us that progress is possible when we choose courage over comfort. Share this video with someone who needs to see that change is possible, that dignity is non-negotiable, that strategic action can accomplish what anger never could. Together, we can build a world where everyone is treated with respect, regardless of the color of their skin. Where success is celebrated, not suspected. Where power serves purpose, and purpose serves people. The Sterling Standard started with 30 seconds of quiet power. What will you do with yours?